welcome everybody to another edition of Hot Program. I am your host with the most, all the way from the East Coast, and as always, I am in airplane mode, and now a man who doesn't need no I don't need no stinking introduction, man. A man who needs no introduction. That is is that Scarface? Not Scarface.
No, that's from Blazing Saddles. We don't
Blazing
need no stinking
Saddles.
badges. We don't need no stinking badges. By the way, hello Pocket Locker, and I hope you're feeling better. I would tell you to be careful due to the reduction in FAA staff. Being in airplane mode could be harmful.
Harmful. Being in, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You going on the trip, you might want to take the bus.
You might want to take the bus. I have two friends that are air traffic controllers. I haven't reached out to them to see if they're both still working, but one guy is complaining as much as ever on Facebook, so he's probably fine. But the other one doesn't have like 20 plus years experience, like the one I went to elementary school with.
Right.
So I got to check on him, make sure he's okay, and get his unbiased assessment of how things are going, as he has always given me.
Facts. All right. Good to look at the chat. See, AR is in the house with the gang. Sarah's here. Nasikat is here. PC is here. Good to see y'all. Good to see y'all showing up. I think I said Sarah. Definitely. All right. Love y'all. Yeah, you know what? I just been flying recently, and I'm always relaxed when I'm flying because I have such little control over what's about to happen. But I definitely understand. Yeah, I definitely understand people's increased anxiety. And look, this is it's sort of not true to me that the right has ever really wanted a small government. I think that's always been a myth. Maybe they wanted to do different things with the government. Maybe they wanted to. One, I think a lot of what they do is easy. I think we do a lot of carrying for them. Like I was telling Lena the other day, I got to play in the NBA 2K. It's a video game, but they're combine to see who was going to go to the pros, because it's a game people were about to play professionally for the first time. It's actually like sponsored by the NBA, right? So this is the NBA's E-League, right? Their online video game league.
Yeah, my nephew probably plays in that.
Yeah, and so, it was like a big deal to have the experience to potentially be drafted into the video game version of the NBA. But what the story I'm really trying to tell you is, to qualify for that, they gave you a certain window of time, couple weeks, few weeks, whatever it was, and you had to play online and win 50 games. And so there's no way I would have won 50 games with my build. I had a pretty weak build, and I'm not a no-lifer. Like I was good at the game, but I'm not gonna be pro, right?
Mm-hmm.
The reason I got that experience was because there was somebody on my team who was what we would say godlike at the game. And they were killer. I mean, this dude could drop 50, 60. He's dropped 90 in games. Like, dude was just on another level. And then the rest of us just kind of had to play our roles. Just, hey, I'm gonna set you some good screens. We're gonna do pick and roll, right? Because he ended up getting drafted like in the first round, like number 16 overall. He was really built like that. The rest of us were not and never had a chance at even being drafted. The point I'm trying to make is for those that don't play games or don't understand the lingo, that's what we mean when we say you're carried. Like you got to benefit from something. You didn't really do it or lead the charge, but you were brought along, right? And I do think it's something important to think about in our current landscape, because I think that's largely what happens. In other words, the left and reasonable people put infrastructure in place. The right wingers avoid it. You know, they act like they don't want to support Social Security. They act like they don't need higher minimum wages. But then when we push for those things and get them through, they benefit from it. And it's the same thing like with small government. Like we put all this stuff in place and then they have the space to act cute and act like they don't want it. Same thing like with, I feel like with the vaccine, you know, they were anti. Look around you, y'all. There's no way the lives most of it. First off, COVID ain't over. Mask up, distance. My main thing, get tested when you get sick. You know, let's try to keep this thing at bay the best we can. But let's be clear. There's absolutely no way we would be headed back to our pre-COVID lives the way that most of us are if it wasn't for the vaccine, right? And again, I'm not talking even about whether you get vaccinated at the individual level or whatever. I'm just saying as the way society has been able to move forward, unquestionably about, you know, that was a huge thing that helped us. But then it makes it convenient for them to act like, well, I don't really want it. I don't really want to deal with it. My body, my choice. And so that's kind of just how I feel about conservatives all the time, is we're carrying them. And they're going to be dragged kicking and screaming, but then ultimately they're going to benefit from it. But that also gives them the avenue they need to complain and act like they didn't want it the whole time.
Well, it's a known fact that red states are carried by blue states economically.
That's a great example. Wow.
I had thought that if I ever did run for public office, and let's say I ascend to the presidency, people put me there, I would have an executive order that says, as a politician, if you didn't vote for something, you can't take credit for it. So let's say there's some like a FEMA related thing, right? There's disaster relief. There's a tornado in Dayton, Ohio, for example. And if you voted against giving aid to FEMA or increasing their budget, you can't take credit for it.
Yeah, because right now they
publicly can't. They can lie and say,
yeah, well, and they do.
We got passed. You voted against it.
You voted against it. Yeah, it happens all the time.
They literally can't take credit for it. And I don't know if it's possible, that essentially everything they say while in an official meeting of whatever political body, right, the House or whatever, that they are not allowed to lie. You are under oath. You are not allowed to tell a lie.
Yeah, that's
and you get 3 lies and you're out. You're out.
Yeah, matter of fact, I think what you said about the oath, it should really be seen as perjury. I mean, maybe you know, if you spout it off once or twice as a joke or something, but as soon as somebody hits you with the, so wait, are you really saying that you're like, you know, then that's it. All right, I want to jump in.
Don't tell jokes. I would say, like, don't even joke. Don't even joke.
Yeah, no, I get you. No, I think that's actually pretty good, and we could have and maybe should have a conversation on this channel someday about what ethical governance looks like. What are the right policies or procedures to have in place for people in positions of power versus what should just be beyond the pale. And I think this is a good time to have that conversation because it's all
being torn down.
Yeah, we're seeing it play out. We're seeing it play out where it's like
2 guys say, you know?
What you thought was you know, a social convention that'll never be broken actually was, and you needed to we need to rethink that. All right, but look, today we're going to be talking about your personal relationship with Jesus. We're going to be responding to
amen.
Brandon's video from Mindshift. I think it's I don't think I've seen it because I tend not to watch videos that I'm going to do on the channel. I just add them to a list. But maybe I've seen a bit of it. I'm glad we're talking about it, and a couple things I'll just state up front. So y'all could probably tell from the thumbnail and title of the stream that I use the Sex and the Cities. He's just not that into you, and I kind of think of that with a lot of these personal relationship things because you're just telling me you have a personal relationship with, and again, for the believers out there that are listening, we're not here deliberately to offend you or upset you, but
no,
I'm just trying to get you to think through things from the perspective of somebody who doesn't believe what you believe. The same way you might for someone in a different religion. To those of us that are outside of your faith, it looks like you have a personal relationship with somebody that never shows up. And it does kind of get to be like the girlfriend in a group of girls, although guys have the same damn thing happen, but just keeping in theme with the show and the book. You supposedly met and fell for this guy, even though that whole part of it's different too, right? It's not like you met Jesus at a nightclub and exchanged numbers. But let's just say you went to church and you encountered Jesus, and you dived in, and you're in love, and now you're trying to figure out why he's not calling, why he it seems to be going on a golf trip with his friends every weekend and doesn't seem to have any time for you. You're trying to figure out why is it that you're trying to get a new economic employment opportunity, and you feel like he's supposed to have connections and knows everybody at everywhere at all of these companies, and he don't seem to be calling in favors to help you get your stuff together. So if this was an episode of Sex in the City, you imagine us, we all got together and we sitting there over dinner giving the tea, and somebody just gonna straight up look at you and hit you with the, I think he's just not that into you.
He's just not that into you.
He's just not that into you.
He's got Lord and Savioring to do elsewhere.
Yeah. He's just not into you. He's that wrestler that's on the road all the time. You're like, yeah, all the wrestlers is on the road. They about 250 days a year. What you trying to figure out is why the 100 days everybody else's partner at home, yours isn't. But the other thing is to take it to what I also think is more serious. It's really problematic for a few reasons. Number one, when somebody goes there where we're outside of the land of what we can at least challenge based on established doctrine or precedent. Right, like when we start talking, that's the thing that's kind of insidious, at least from someone who's trying to help people think through these things. Once you get to personal relationship, it no longer has to be based in scripture or systematic theology or anything. It's literally just a person gets to decide then what is really part of or not part of the character of the deity. And then of course the final thing is like Uncle Bobby says, religion is the worship of your own ego. Please notice how you and your God agree about everything, including the things you don't agree about. And so when that happens, you now have as many different versions of the religion as you have believers. At least as many different versions are as there are believers who are on the personal relationship tip and prioritize that. I guess let's just, because there's always people listening and trying to take the little nuances out of context. Let's be very nuanced. We're saying about the people who not only have a personal relationship with Jesus, because we believe, because I'm leaving room for there to be believers who are not about that life, right? And then also being clear that it then has to be a person who prioritizes sort of the relationship aspect of the God bond than other things. So hopefully that's enough asterisks hanging for the episode. And then the final thing I'll say, just to get people's wheels turning before we jump in, is this is also happening with other religions. We tend to hear a lot about a personal relationship with Jesus, and so it kind of feels like a uniquely Christian thing to do. But I've found in my conversations with believers of other religions that maybe they don't say it the same way. Maybe they don't come out and say, I have a personal relationship with Muhammad, or a personal relationship with Joseph Smith, or a personal relationship with, the patriarchs or something like that. But when you really, even somebody like an Orthodox Jew, I think if you really push them, they're going to talk about how somehow their journey, their purpose, their process, whatever, is about coming to know their deity in an incredibly personal and intimate way. So I do think it's a broader phenomena than just the personal relationship with Jesus.
I'm gonna post a link in the chat to a song by, it's what I sent you privately, Pocket Locker. I figured I'd just log on and do it. By a woman named Susan Scheller. I worked in a bar, and Susan Scheller would be one of our musicians that came in and sang. And she had this song that at that time in my life, I had just been baptized, and it was very sort of in your face, between, like, if you're on the fence between staying religious and not being religious, this is the song you don't want to hear, because it goes, "Dear God, I'm tired and I'm lonely. I know it's late and I'm calling you at home. There's so many others jamming your phone line. Patch me through to your private telephone." And it's, you get the sense, as I still sing this song because it's just a great song, but it's reminiscent of thinking, wow, God's kind of not there. It doesn't explicitly say that, but you're getting the picture. And she goes on to say, well, she's pleading in the song, like, something, send someone down to help me up, and it's just beautifully written. And
Go ahead, MyOneBlack Friend. For some reason, I had a hard time. Go ahead.
Oh, I just encourage everyone after the show, check that out. Susan Scheller, and her band was called. Oh, I don't see it showing up in the chat. That is. That's how you know it's me in there somewhere. But anyway.
All right, I'm trying to make it so. Nashiket keeps getting modded by the bot. Sorry about that, Nashiket. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. We appreciate you. And some of the message I'm seeing that get filtered out, there's nothing wrong with them that I can see. All right, y'all. Let's get into it. So today we're going to be checking out Brandon from Mindshift. definitely blowing up. Been on Mythvision too, talking about his deconversion story. Channel's definitely doing great. Would love to have the opportunity to sit down and chat with this dude at some point, of course. Don't know if we'll get through all of this. Obviously, it's a longer one, so we'll try to listen to sort of longer chunks of it and then give our 2 cents. But y'all know it's we'll just see how it goes. All right, appreciate y'all. Also, cheers to everybody out there. Hope everybody's having a great Sunday. Woo, that was a shot of straight tequila.
Water.
Hey, water works, baby.
Excuses for the average Christian believer is that of their personal relationship with their God. It is very hard to argue with, very hard to reason with. You can cover all day all the issues about the Bible, all the issues with the church, all the issues with the tradition and the history of this religion, and it doesn't mean anything to them. They will still say, well, you must be missing something. There must be something we can't understand because I know my God. I have a relationship with my God. I know my God is good. I know my God loves me. I know he cares for me, and I know he has a plan for me. I talk to him every day. I spend time with him. Again, I have a personal relationship with him. And oh, how I sympathize. As you know, I was a believer for 30 years, and if you would have asked me my greatest proof, the best way I could convince anybody that I knew for a fact this God was real, I would have pointed anecdotally to my personal experience, all the things that I had felt, all the things that I had seen, all the amazing events that were too otherwise considered coincidence to be not divine. And personal experience is its own category, and within that you have the personal relationship with God, and that's the one I want to focus on today. And again, I don't do this to take away from anything or anyone, but for the believer who is doubting or deconstructing or in the process of their actual deconversion, I think this is one of the hardest things to reason against. All those moments where you felt close to your God, where you really felt like you had a relationship. But I think there's some issues with that, and I want to point them out today, and I'm going to do so mainly through just asking questions. Let's forget all the scripture today, because it doesn't matter to people in personal relationships. Let's forget all of the preaching and lectures and philosophical points. I'm hopeful that I can just ask you some pretty basic questions here that might illuminate this idea for you about why this personal experience is not what you think it is and doesn't mean what you think it does. I'm going to start off with one question that I think might seem silly on the surface, but really consider it here. When you say you have a...
All right, we're about to jump into it. Just, I think it's interesting how he teed this up. Couple things I want to say is, believe it or not, Hot Program was started to also be a show where we talk to believers and theists in particular. Like, it was like, okay, if we talk to other non-believers, all right, that's cool. If we do call-ins or whatever, but originally it was like, hey, it was good to have believers on. Now, to be honest with you, y'all know it's kind of hard to find good faith people that want to do this, and so we had some people on that I probably wouldn't have on again. So that was kind of an issue, but we got through it. My point is to say that, like, I think we accepted it somewhere along the way, or at least I did, that there's a certain community that enjoys our content and comes for it, but I still do see myself as someone that would like to help people who are going through or will go through what I went through and a lot of us went through. And so I just kind of want to take a second to say he's framing this all as a conversation to believers. I sometimes get a little about doing that because I just don't know how productive it actually is. But for the sake of the exercise today, it'd be great if believers could grant us the same thing. The fact that, yes, people think differently than you do, but they've often been where you're at, and they're actually trying to help you understand how people who think differently than you see things. And that is something I really want to engage with more believers on. If I could get nowhere else, because that was my personal motivation, was that I should at least be able to ask these questions and understand these things. So I would just encourage a believer to hang in there, hang in there for the ride. It's not a personal attack. You got anything, or you want me to just play?
I'm definitely not here for the personal attacks on believers. I mean, well, I guess that isn't entirely true. I'll call out a Frank Turek or like what's that guy's name? Gary Habermas, who's offered, in my opinion, one of the greatest quotes in all of philosophy. I will gladly call people like that because I think they're lying to people. And I think they're doing it to maintain the illusion. You know, it's funny. I don't know that they do it for the money. I wonder, do they want to maintain the illusion for people because they think it makes the world a better place? Frank Turek probably already has money. Gary Habermas, I don't know about his situation. He probably does too. Many Christians are quite fond of his publications, so he's probably okay as well. But yeah, I have an issue with that you just should not keep doing that. My daughter's 5 months old in a couple of days. So do I tell her about the Tooth Fairy? And if so, what? Do I tell her about Santa Claus? If so, what? Do I tell her about the Easter Bunny? If so, what? Because there's all things that she could enjoy stories about. And if believed in the wrong way, those are things that could, hinder her development in some kind of way. And we have adults who, from our non-believing perspective, believe something that literally, can make them a much worse person and to society. I don't know how hard. I don't know how do we address that? I wanted to say fight. I wanted to say combat. But how do we address that in a way, and we've been trying to do it here, that is both, I would say, not vicious and not ignorable.
Right.
Like you can't ignore what I'm saying. So anyway, that's my 2 cents on that.
There is, I don't know where to put these people. Like, to some extent, to me, they are, hang on a sec. Maybe this is it.
Okay, I'm gonna just jump across the room real quick. I'll be right back.
Sure. So what I'm trying to get people to do is think about misinformation versus disinformation. And I'm seeing some graphs that are supposed to be able to help us. All right, I'll just pull it up. All right, so let's go here. So you can see here in this graph, it's like, facticity. Basically, how factual is something? There's things that are highly factual or not so factual. And what is the author's intent to deceive? Is it low, so they're not really necessarily all that trying to see, or are they really definitely trying to deceive you? And you can see where things go. Like news satire is actually high. Like it actually has a lot of facts. Like they're usually not making things up. But to some extent, you could say that there's somewhat of an intention to deceive because you're poking fun or whatever, right? Same thing with news. News parody is different because it's going to be like lower. It's going to be like when you see like people joking and they're kind of like making up things that haven't really happened, and they're like exaggerating or they're sort of role playing. I don't know if you guys saw the video where the guy was talking about Trump colonizing Mars with Elon Musk, and they made Mars. They're going to Mars-a-Lago, so that's a parody.
Mars-a-Lago. Well played.
And so, advertising and propaganda, a lot of times that includes good factual basis, but it's also highly intention to deceive. Same with fabrication. I don't really like this conception so much, but I'm just pulling it up to show what's out there. Here's another one. Whether you're active fabrication or no active fabrication, misinformation is when you don't have an intent to harm, and you're not actively fabricating things, but you're just spreading bad information. Whereas disinformation is like, it's an active fabrication, and you actually probably do have the intent to harm because you're creating and spreading this. Propaganda is here too. It requires active fabrication and usually is accompanied with an intent to harm. So, right, whereas like satire, you're usually not intending to harm, and contextual deception has no active fabrication. So the thing, like, this is probably how most people think of it. Misinformation is you think it's true, but it's not. Disinformation is you know it's not true, but you say it anyway. And I'm trying to get us to think about where we think apologists and the people we deal with fall along those spectrum. And for some reason, when you were talking to me just previously, the phrase that came to my mind was sincerely deceived. Like,
yeah.
it's
sincerely wrong. They're sincerely wrong.
Yeah, but in a way that's different than like sincerely mistaken. Right? Like, I think a lot of pew fillers, that's what I call, normal church folks, you're not in ministry, you're not an apologist, pew fillers. A lot of them are sincerely mistaken, I think. But I think a lot of the, say, apologists, they've had to undergo a more active deception. But I think so many of them are so deep down that rabbit hole that's become their identity to be consistent with this. So I don't know, yo. I don't know. I'm still thinking about it. But these are just the things I was thinking about. All right, the other thing I want to bring up real quick, and not to play word games, but to kind of play word games. If you think about this whole personal relationship thing, we never actually define it. We never actually talk about what it means. And
that's
so
it's a great point.
Yeah.
What does it entail? What's included?
Yeah, so if you look up the definition of personal, there's two, right? Of, affecting, or belonging to a particular person rather than anyone else. So when you say you have a personal relationship with Jesus, and I think people are maybe saying different things when they say it. I think a lot of people are saying, I belong to Jesus, or he belongs to me. We have a relationship that is uniquely mine. And I think that is the type of person that does sidestep doctrine, denomination, all of that. They're really trying to tell you, me and Jesus have our own thing going on that doesn't concern or involve anybody else. The second one, over concerning one's private life, relationships, and emotions rather than matters connected with one's public or professional career. That's interesting too, because I see that as saying, Jesus is my daddy, or Jesus is my king, Jesus is my husband. My relationship with them is personal. In a sense, what's interesting about this one is it kind of sidesteps accountability for what they do. The example that came to mind for me was Trump. I think Melania Trump can go fuck herself, largely because I think she is at best an enabler, and far more likely, a lot of times an active participant in the things that are so destructive to this country, and certainly never steps up as Trump's wife or the first lady to actually help people or intervene or anything like that.
She's just there for her check. She's just there for her check. That's all.
And I think she, as well as the children, are, maybe with the exception of Barron, which I don't even think is true about him, because now he's of age and they're already like trying to thrust him into political spotlight. But anyway, I think they're in the arena. And since they're in the arena, I think criticism of them is fair. However, a lot of people see it as, you shouldn't be talking about them. You got issues with Trump, okay? Maybe Don Jr. and Ivanka and Eric, because they're actively involved in things. But for the most part, you should be leaving Melania alone because she has a personal relationship with Trump outside of the public spotlight. Whether you agree with that or not is not the point, y'all. What I'm trying to get you to look at is that a lot of people see it that way because we sort of feel like that's personal, right? Even to the extent that, like, like I'm in a relationship with a believer, you're in a relationship with a believer, Nitty's in a relationship with a believer. Yeah, people could come to us and say, well, what the heck is up with this? Y'all talk about what y'all talk about on your channels, and then you turn off the thing, and then you're in a relationship with a believer, and we'd be like, that's personal, right? That's my personal life. Like, it has nothing, you know what I'm saying? So I think it's interesting to think about personal in that context, because I think that's what happens for a lot of people. In other words, they're thinking when you hit them with the, well, did you know God commands genocide? He murdered everything. Do you know about biblical slavery? All these issues you could bring up to them. A lot of them are like, whoa, 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 whoa. I have a personal relationship with Jesus, right? Like don't, like, you can't throw me in the middle of all that, because my relationship with him is personal. He's just my God, my King, my Lord, my Savior. It's not me who's out there, causing hurricanes and killing babies. So it's interesting to think about how you can use personal and how it really functions when it actually comes to having the discussions. And then, of course, there's one more, which is, what do we even think we mean when somebody says a personal relationship? Of course, this is AI, but it says a personal relationship refers to a close, intimate connection between individuals built on emotional bonds and mutual understanding, often characterized by significant investment, time, energy, and trust, typically including relationships with family members, close friends, and romantic partners, essentially a deeper level of connection beyond casual acquaintance. So it's interesting to keep that in mind too, especially because I think we're in bizarro world where, for most of us, a personal relationship by definition then means you're spending time together. I know your family, you know mine, where we sit down every Sunday to host a podcast. We get together after church for coffee. We're part of the same bowling league. We went to the same high school. And so if you're a believer and you're claiming this personal relationship, just please understand that, like, where other people are coming from is, this doesn't look like a personal relationship. Right. And so it almost seems like Christianese or something, where they're defining something as a personal relationship that in any other context would not be seen as such.
Yeah. Subcultures tend to develop their own language, if you will. And at times they will use terms that outsiders use in a completely new way. And I think personal relationship with Jesus is one of those times where that's happened. Can you borrow Jesus's truck? No. Is Jesus going to help you move? No. Can you borrow money from Jesus? No. You can give Jesus money though.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that it's easy to talk about from the inside. And the fascinating thing is, if we had a bunch of believers to talk to us about it, if they listen to each other, there's a lot of yup, until they go super spiritual with it, to where God is talking to them and telling them to do things that may seem unusual or extreme. And then other people like, God wouldn't say that. The criticism begins, right? Or Jesus would never say that. Jesus would never ask that. And I feel like saying, you got to read the front 2/3 of the Bible. Don't be so sure.
Yeah, and I would say this, too, like to your point, to most believers, when you start giving God credit for your direct decisions and choices, you're right. There's kind of a, whoa, you're almost too serious about this. You've taken it beyond the pale, so to speak. Yeah, no, that's a really good point.
Yeah, so just like when there was a woman years ago who killed her children, and she said it was because God wanted her to. Why doesn't that defense hold up in court? We literally have examples in the Bible where not only did he kill his own kid to save someone else, but he lost the Hebrews lost a battle because some other oppositional ruler killed his kid. And of course, there's the Abraham and Isaac thing, which there are targums that suggest that Isaac didn't come down off that mountain. You know, that Abraham got away with killing his kid. Anyway.
Yeah. Let's keep going. But Suvami articulated kind of what I was saying before earlier. I don't care about it being personal. What I don't like is a woman being attacked because of her husband's actions. Yes, that's what I was saying. That's how a lot of people feel. And to be honest, that extends to kids and, you know, sometimes beyond. I hate to say this, y'all, even friends, right? Sometimes you'll see like a person, a controversial figure, and you'll see interviews with people who were just friends with that person, and they'll kind of do the same thing. Like, we were friends. Like, I shouldn't be attacked for their choices. Like, I wasn't caught up in it. I'm just somebody who, you know, we used to kick it because we came up in our careers together or whatever. But Melania has been caught on recording enough times to know she's complicit. Yes, yeah, absolutely. But definitely, I think that it's, at least for me, it was very insightful to read that definition of personal and think about how I think it does fit into the ingratiated defense of the faith that most believers are conditioned with. Like, I realized when I read it how much it relates to that type of thing of not criticizing somebody for another person's decisions when they have a personal relationship with them. It really does function as a shield, right? It really is like saying, hey, God works in mysterious ways. You know, I might not have done the things he did, but, you know, my relationship with him is personal. So, you know, don't try to hold me accountable for it.
Right.
All right, let's go ahead and keep rolling.
A personal relationship. I often hear people say different names. Sometimes they will talk about their personal relationship with Jesus. Sometimes they will talk about their personal relationship with God. Now, we're talking about the Christian tradition and religion here, so that's going to involve the Trinity. Do you have two different relationships, one with God the Father and one with Jesus the Son? When you pray, do you pray to one of them or both of them, or do you switch it up depending? When you start your prayer with Dear God, do you mean Dear Yahweh, or do you mean Dear Jesus, or do you mean Dear Trinity? Many people will pray in Jesus' name to the Father. What about the Holy Spirit? Do you ever pray to the Holy Spirit? Why does he get left out? Do you have distinct relationships? Do you have kind of a history with Jesus via your prayer time, your quiet time, that you don't have with his Father? Obviously, the Father knows about it, but is he involved in it in the same way? Some might say this is a problem with the Trinity itself, and I would agree. I think it gets us into a lot of hot water in many different areas, but having a personal relationship with three beings in one must be a pretty tricky thing, and I wonder just how much the average Christian has thought about that. Can you genuinely know and love and be in relationship with three divine persons simultaneously in the same way? And if you do have distinct relationships with the three of them, is it that different from the concepts of polytheism, where you pray to different gods for different things because they have different access and different responsibilities? We're starting off with something, I think, easier that a lot of Christians will just simply ignore. In fact, I probably just lost a bunch of people from watching the rest of the video because I gave them an out. To them, that was a silly question and they're moving on. But I think it's only going to get harder as I go through more questions here. So I wanted to just lay this foundation situation that if you zoom all the way out, do we not have problems right at the base? The second thing why we're still zoomed out is I wonder what you think about believers of other gods who claim to also have personal relationships. How do you excuse that? If you are a Christian, you do not believe in Krishna. You do not believe in Allah. You do not believe in Mormonism or that they are getting at all to the right God in the right way, even if they claim some of the same roots. And yet people in all three of those religions will claim to have personal encounters and personal relationships with their God. They will claim to feel loved and heard and comforted and supported and guided by their God. Anything that has ever been said by a Christian about how they feel based off their personal relationship with their God has been said by billions of others for hundreds of other gods. So what do you think is the truth for them? I'm not trying to set up a gotcha question, but you can probably see where it's going. You as a Christian have to believe those gods aren't real and that they are either lying or that they have been deceived, that they are incorrect, that it is some psychological effect that they are having that allows them to perceive a relationship that isn't actually there. And by the way, I remember having this conversation with a close Christian in my life, and they literally didn't believe that people in other religions had these same experiences. And I think that's true for many Christians. I think they're in a very tight, closed circle, and they just don't even know what is claimed by other believers of other gods. But let me assure you, and go do some research for yourself, go talk to someone outside of your own faith and see their fervor, see their devotion, see their intimacy that they have with their creator. And then how do you reconcile that?
And
if you can find an excuse for them why it's not true for them, which it can't be for them under your belief system, could that also apply to yourself? The next thing that I want to ask about.
All right. So no, that was good timing. So go ahead.
One of the things that made it easy for me to leave the Christian religion was all the exposure I had to people of other religions and seeing how devout they were, seeing how precious what they believed was to them, while being able to look at them. And I guess I'm lucky. Even when I believed in God, I could look at what they were doing uncritically. It wasn't that it was wrong. It was just a different way to me. And I didn't have the picture that, well, it all scrolls up to the God of the Bible. These people are just misinformed, but really, they're honoring him somehow with these rituals that they're doing. Yeah, it's really about, I never made that sort of connection. I never gave that sort of excuse, but what I did was respect the people of those other faiths. I wasn't blind to the fact that there were benefits to how they practice their religion, that I could see it helping them, that I would listen to their testimony of how their faith practice enriched their lives. I don't need to ignore that. I didn't want to ignore that. I was there to see that. I was there to see what other people did. And other than being asked, hey, if I'd like to convert to Judaism and Buddhism, there was no challenging what I believed. And I think that attitude is probably less common. I'm wondering if if people don't get offended that what they believe, i.e. in Christianity, these other faiths are a challenge to it. Like maybe it's not true.
Yeah.
And there are people we've heard them ignorantly say like the Bible is the oldest book. But that's not true.
I was gonna say it's why I think we're just so past this. I think we really are in an era where religion is obsolete and also dangerous. It's like it's sort of like working in a factory with equipment from the earliest factories and saying, yeah, not only is this not the most current tools, these are dangerous tools. Let's look at how many people died before, the intervention of 150 years of regulation to make people's lives safer. And yeah, part of it is these mutually exclusive claims, and you know what happens when one group wants the other group's land or to control them or whatever. But you make a good point about sort of a lot of times believers are not sincerely engaging with people who think differently than they do, and then coming to the realization of just how on par with their own experience the believer of a different faith is in terms of the scriptural basis of what they believe, their practices, the sincerity, and of course the interpersonal way they relate to their God. What I want to mention was a couple things. So one, he made a profound point about how does a believer address the Trinity? Who do they pray to? For me, I did conscientiously pray somewhat differently, usually praying to Jesus, but quite often praying to the Father. And yes, seeing those as different, but then also seeing them as the same. And I don't know if that makes any sense to any other believers or former believers out there, but that's, you know, I think I'm just being honest with how it was. It was sometimes one, sometimes the other, sometimes both, sometimes one or the other, and just understanding that to also be the rest. And that's just how I got down. Less the Holy Spirit, would kind of have to think to include the Holy Spirit, but would do that. Also, you got to remember, even though I was Protestant mostly, I also saw myself as very Catholic because I was a product of Catholic schools, and some Catholic prayers are explicitly addressed to the Holy Spirit. So I guess I had just a little bit more of that in me. So, and also there are songs that are very different. You know, if you listen to a lot of worship music, a lot of it is Jesus, 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 but there's a lot of music that's also Father, 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 and there's also a lot of music that's Come Holy Spirit. So that's out there. But I do think it leads to like bigger questions about the roles they play. So for instance, as a young adult, I was a youth minister at a church, and I remember doing an activity. It's going to sound so silly, y'all, but I remember doing an activity with the kids where we were supposed to like draw their vision of heaven or whatever. This was like supposed to be art class or whatever. And I guess I'm filling in for the art teacher, and I'm just, what am I supposed to be doing? Oh, this is what we're doing. Okay, cool. All right. But what was interesting was that mine was basically like a big ass wrestling ring, and then like a bandstand, and like drums all over the place. And it was interesting because that was my thing. My thing was like heaven was going to be really me and Jesus, and we're just going to be rocking out. And I'm grown. I'm grown, and I'm a believer, but I'm headed towards, I'm headed out. But I still.
So do you show up in heaven pocket locker and go, you guys can build this?
Yeah, exactly.
Already, right?
But that's how I saw it. You know, it's gonna be me and Jesus. We're gonna be doing professional wrestling together and playing music. And that's it. And so it was very interesting because, to his point, God the Father was not really necessarily a super big part of that picture. It almost feels like you passed the Father's test to get up in here, but now that part's over. And then, which is also interesting because I also don't want to. It's like I don't want to spend the time supplicating and worshiping and whatever, giving praise to God. That was not my idea of heaven. That's also an interesting observation. And then, of course, the Holy Spirit basically had little or nothing to do with it at all. Yeah. So. Also interesting. And then one more thing I thought was very interesting, because he did mention the other faiths and the fact that their believers do have an interpersonal relationship with their God as well. But something I think that's a big part of that is, I think it reveals that the whole personal relationship with Jesus is really word games. And I hate to say it, but I also think that means the people, even like a little bit of what people were saying in the chat before, The people who go to, well, my religion or this religion over here isn't about a personal relationship with a deity or whatever. I think it's all a bunch of nonsense, because even if you're not a Christian, I think it does it has largely language Christians have stumbled upon, and they like it because it basically says being a Christian is different. Being a Christian is different than other religions, and it's special and somehow more correct because it's. And I think a lot of it, to be honest, is just resting on the infallibility. I think. Woo, I don't know, y'all. I don't know if I'm cooking right now or preparing the ingredients to cook or about to just throw a nasty ass TV dinner in the microwave, but we're gonna find out. But y'all, I think a large part of it is the meta evolution of apologetics. Hang on a sec with me, y'all. I think largely belief, especially right now, is a cope. It's very clear to me that the best way to understand the world around us is science. And beyond that, we've also culturally evolved to a place where some variation of humanism or humanism plus the rest of life and the living kingdom or whatever, we've just really progressed beyond these sort of archaic kind of belief systems and practices. And part of what people kept doing was to really, what I want to call a grand arc of the God of the gaps. You know, we couldn't explain disease, we couldn't explain the weather, we couldn't explain where people come from. And as science kept knocking those down one after the other, there was always a retreat. And I think evolution is so challenging to so many believers because that was one of those last serious things that people were hanging their hat on. God is the creator, and you can't explain where we come from without him, and you can't explain where species come from, right? And a lot of people are still, in a sense, hanging their hat on the origin of life, or you can't explain what happened 1 second before the Big Bang, if that's even a coherent concept. But I think overall on this grander arc, intelligent, organized religions have realized that's just a losing battle. It's just a losing battle. What can we really do to keep this thing going, no matter what they say? And I think that it coincides with the evolution, for instance, of the printing press and things, to where it was like, it used to be only the priest class could read the text, and the texts weren't in the language that people spoke, and yada, yada, yada. And then you get sort of mass production, so everybody can have their own Bible and translate it into your own language, and a Protestant Reformation bringing up all these different flavors. And so I think eventually this is like an adaptation for Christianity, and it's a really good one because it just sidesteps all of that and says, no, now it's really all about this personal relationship with God. And that is almost the most infallible thing ever. Like, right? Like, how can I prove you don't, that Jesus isn't living in your heart spiritually? Well, of course I can't. And I think that that's why it was such a great adaptation, because it's really resilient to any sort of empirical challenge.
I want to challenge what you just said. I absolutely think you can prove to people that Jesus isn't living in their heart. I would say almost any Christian you could prove that to. And it's just asking them simple questions like, how long have you been a Christian? Oh, I've been a Christian 31 years. Have you read the Bible all the way through? No. Would you be willing to, and just start stuff Jesus has been saying in the Bible? Hey, if you want to follow me, if you want to honor me, if you believe in me, you will do these things. And they will be if they're honest, they'll have to admit, I do almost none of that. That doesn't contradict this Jesus said. Are they practicing that? No. And you'll get down to the bottom of it for them, like, I don't know what it is you're doing. Are you playing church? Is it churchianity? Are you just trying to be a good person? Because that's what I'm doing. Are you just trying to be a good person? I don't know, but you can't really, you're going to have to take your Christianity art jersey off, because that's not what you are. That's not who you are. That's not what you do. And there's the idea.
But I think that's holding them to
a hot program on it with Jesus's liberal talking points, and people were offended. Like, where are you getting all these liberal talking points?
Right. Why are you so woke?
Church. Like, Jesus wasn't freaking liberal.
Right.
You know, on some levels, on other levels, he was a conservative. They're supposed to observe all of the law according to Jesus, but not Paul, because that contradicts, you know. Paul made exceptions. And the early church made exceptions because.
So my thing is just
who didn't want to give up things. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say my thing was just to highlight that it's in a sense word games. I get what you're saying. It's something you can actually, you know, tear down if you get into an actual argument about it. But mine was just more that it puts them in a headspace to believe ordinary religious behavior is somehow special and extraordinary in the case of their practices of Christianity. Because like he's saying, if you think about these other faith traditions, they believe the same thing. So they may not say I have a personal relationship with my God, but they do believe they have a personal relationship with their God. They do pray, they do worship, they do believe that their God can and does bless them and can and does withhold blessings. And even the people who say, well, I believe in this totally devoid, this somehow God that's totally devoid of human interaction and totally impersonal or whatever. First off, I just think people are trying to redefine God into a less easily disproved being. But it also gets into a point where it's like, well, then who cares? If God is just this thing, set up the conditions of the universe and let it unfold and isn't actively intervening in it, then why care? Why have religion? Why even believe in this thing? There's no evidence to believe in it. And if it's actually impersonal and it doesn't actually care, then literally why believe in it or why do it? And so I think it's sort of disingenuous. I think anybody that comes to you and is dealing with religious practice, to me, to some extent, believes in a personal relationship with the deity, because what else is influencing you? If you say to me, you know, it's very difficult to understand human motivation and decisions without understanding what's influencing them. So you might say your God is impersonal, but again, if you feel like you need to put on special clothing during certain times of the year or certain times of the week and then go to special places so you can sit and be in this God's presence or meditate, or you really ought to abstain from alcohol, sex, weed, and, you know, any other intoxicant. There's just all these lists of things you have to change personally, and it feels like semantics to try to figure out, okay, who is really operating from a personal relationship in that sense. So I do think that I think it makes Christians feel special, and it also makes non-Christians feel like they're better than this, like they don't have this silly thing. But I think they're really all kind of in the same boat, whether they like it or not, because I just don't think there is a lot of people out there practicing religion, believing and worshiping a God that is impersonal or uninterested in their affairs. I just think if that were the case, people wouldn't even bother. All right, here we go.
about is so often this excuse comes to me because of what I'm pointing out about the issues with the Bible. It literally happens every single video that I make. Here's just one example. But you only have the ideas you have about your God and what a personal relationship with him looks like because of the scriptures. It's silly to have to point out that no one on the American continents before the exposure of the Europeans claimed to have a personal relationship with Yahweh or Jesus Christ or the Holy Spirit. You first need the knowledge of who God is, how you communicate with him, what you can expect from him, etc., before you can develop the personal relationship. But that's backwards, isn't it? In a real relationship. I go get coffee and I bump into someone and I meet them. I experience them. They tell me their name. They tell me how to get in contact with them. It does start personal and then the communication follows. But you're working off this prior communication, the Word of God, the Scripture, church history, church teaching, to influence your relationship. I think that's a very important thing to understand that is completely backwards and not what one would expect of a real personal relationship. Again, it's the same thing for believers elsewhere. If you were raised in a Muslim country and you called out to Allah instead of Yahweh, the very fact that you even know what your God's name is comes from your culture and what you were taught in the Holy Scriptures, etc. It was not first given to you in the actual relationship with this being. You created the relationship based off the information you had. So I bring this up mainly to first point to the fact that you can't excuse the Bible. If you have issues with what the Word of God says and you want to cherry pick the parts that you like, and then you want to ignore most of it in general because you have special revelation, because you heard from God in your quiet time, because you actually know his true character from spending time with him, that just simply doesn't work. It all comes together. There's a chain of events that cannot be ignored. And most funny yet, a lot of the times this comes up because people will concede issues with the Bible, but then say why it doesn't matter because of what they know from their personal relationship with God. But if the Bible, the source material, is or can be flawed, can then not your understanding and thus relationship with this God also be flawed? Now, I want to take some time in this next section here where I'm...
All right. So before he does this, we're talking about the biblical basis. So I'm going to talk to y'all about something that's kind of funny, but maybe hopefully it'll help illuminate my thoughts on this, y'all. So I'm going to talk to y'all about player traps and the type of things you have to do if you have multiple partners, so like a poly relationship, right? And for those who know what a player trap is basically something that, you know, let's say you're single or you're out there and maybe you're seeing multiple people or whatever, right? A player trap is something that can get you basically in trouble as a consequence of the way you're treating the different people you're talking to or dealing with. And so there are certain things you have to do to avoid player traps. Okay. So here's one. Just texting the wrong person, right? That's a player trap because, you know, sometimes you groggy, you're a little confused. You know, you wake up, you thought you were texting one girl, you were actually texting the other, and you hit somebody with the wrong text message. I'm raising my hand, yo. Absolutely, I have absolutely done that shit. Sometimes I've been able to play it off and work it into something else, and things were all right. And other times it was like, yeah, I'm not going to be seeing that person anytime soon. I just got all sorts of. So one of the things that's funny about this is, if you are in an explicit relationship or situation where you're dating multiple people, or like in my case, you're in a poly relationship, one of the things you have to do is you try to treat people the same. So one of the stories I used to think was so funny was there was this guy and he had 4 girlfriends. And so he had figured out that he had to take every single one of them on the same exact vacation every single time. Why? Because he wanted to have time to get away with them one-on-one, but you can't take one to Paris and one to Hawaii and the other to Jamaica and the other to California, because they go compare notes on that trip. And if it's different, right, there's going to be hell to pay. So you do the same thing for all of them, right? And I had situations like, you know, like when I had multiple partners, it was like, look, if my boss asks us out to burgers and drinks, or I'm going to a cookout with friends or something like that, and people are +1, I always email the host, is it okay if I'm +2? Why? Because even though my partners would say, you could just bring one of us, it's fine, we wouldn't be offended. Don't fall for that trick, gang. That's a player trap. You got to bring both of them, or else there's going to be hell to pay, because you're going to be suggesting that one is more important than the other. So even if they tell you that's okay, that's not okay. That's a player trap. All right, so where am I going with this, gang?
Yeah, where?
The point is, people feel some type of way when you do something that's not unique for them. There's something to be said where it's like, okay, is this really something just for me, or is this really something you're just giving to everybody? Like, if you're just, and it somehow diminishes, right? If I tell the same exact story, oh my God, baby, you'll never what happened. You're the first person I just got to tell you, and then you find out I'm actually copying and pasting that to 4 other women, you're going to feel some type of way about that. The God proposition goes so much further than that. It's not that Jesus wrote you a love letter and then wrote the same exact love letter to every other single person in humanity, right? That would be crazy, but he didn't even do that, y'all. The letter was written thousands of years ago.
Before you were born.
Before your generations beyond generations were even born. And he has not even updated it or bothered to, wrap it special for you and send it for your birthday. Like, he won't even give you the poly boyfriend treatment of taking you and your girlfriends out to dinner together or something. Like, damn, Jesus, I'm not asking you to pretend I'm your one and only, but could you give me a little bit of something? Could you at least come here and like sign my Bible and put I love you in it or something? Something to suggest that I mean something to you.
Hey,
but
girl,
yeah, y'all, I don't know. I was probably telling y'all way too much, but that's what it made me think of. It made me think of like, wow, it's crazy. Like, when you're in an intimate, quote unquote, personal relationship with somebody, you expect them to do things uniquely and special just for you, right? And at other times, if there's something reserved for people of a certain status, and it could be anything, y'all know this if you have children, right? Like, if you have children, and you buy them gifts, like if they all want the hot new toy, like you're probably going to get it for all of them, or you're going to get them different things based on their personality, but you're not going to try to spend $1,000 on one kid and $20 on the other. You're going to try to like equalize it, right? And then whatever clothes or whatever you're going to get them all the same, right? Like, like people deal with this, and it's just the artifact of being in a real relationship with people. And it never strikes me, or it never strikes believers apparently, that like this thing where you were introduced to Jesus, right, is actually just a letter he wrote to the whole world, that you show up and fall in love with him all over again. I never thought about it that way, but it's so interesting. All right, I'm gonna hit play.
Questions, and what we're going to do here is we're going to compare what a real personal relationship would look like. I have some bullet points for us that we're going to work through, and again, just be honest here. And if you find yourself having to special plead for why it would be different with you and your relationship with God versus you and your relationship with literally anyone else, why does the most perfect being of all time, the very source of truth, light, and love, who claims to desire a relationship with you, need so many excuses for being so much worse at it than even the worst of the friends in your life? So let's talk about communication for the first bullet point. In real relationships, both parties participate. Both parties talk and both parties listen. If you text a friend, they respond. And sometimes they will text you first and then you will respond. And I can hear so many excuses coming, but stick with me here. But with God, it is a one-sided relationship. Prayers feel like messages left on read with no direct reply. Now, sometimes you might convince yourself you get a reply, and we can talk about all the issues with prayer, which you can see these videos here, because that's going to be a big excuse for you here is, no, my God does communicate with me. I hear from him. And while I'm plugging videos, check out this one where Vlad shows us just how impossible it is to know if you're actually hearing from God or not. In fact, this is one of the biggest issues in Christianity. Go to any small group, go to any Bible study, talk to any individual believer in their life, and I guarantee you quite quickly you will hear confusion around if that was really God, was it the devil, or was it just their mind? The very fact that our communication chamber with God, our brain, can be hacked by the enemy so easily, and also is where your natural psychology
oh, there you go. Never mind.
Makes it maybe the worst, most unreliable
worries,
communication method ever. Again, comparing it with anyone in your life. Yeah, someone might have taken your friend's phone, but you can find that out. And most of the time, when you see it's their name come through in your contacts, you can know who you're speaking to. And if you're ever in doubt, you can get on a Skype call, or you can meet them in real life. There are 1,000 ways to troubleshoot. Wait a second, that doesn't seem like my friend. I wonder if something's going on. But you can't do that with God. All you can do is ask God again, and you're back to predicament 1. If the response is only felt subjectively, and again, I hate to be the person who's like, be honest, but really what I'm encouraging you is to think through this properly. You understand that when you think you're hearing from God, it's going through the same channels and processes as any other feeling you've ever had. And even the Bible says that the heart is deceitful amongst all things. Surely you have felt things that weren't true before. Have you ever been afraid when you shouldn't have been? Did you ever feel sad and you couldn't quite place your finger on it? Did you ever get a moment of euphoria and it was wonderful, but you had nothing to assign it to? Here's just a quick list of hormones and how they operate in your body. This is what we know from science. Then you take all of the individualistic experiences we can have in our life and how they trigger so many different things in us, and we are a mess at being able to properly identify this wealth of information that is constantly going on inside our heads. But again, going back to God's responses that come in the way of gut feelings / intuition or Bible verses or coincidences, is that really real communication? If someone told you their spouse only spoke to them in riddles and sometimes, most of the time, straight up ignored them, and that there would be major consequences for not deciphering the riddles correctly, and that they could never see them or their actual handwriting or an actual text message or their actual voice, that the spouse would speak to them in their spirit, would that sound healthy to you? Would you encourage that as good communication and behavior? Of course not. Of course not. Again, so many excuses for God, the most perfect being of all time, supposedly. We could talk this entire video about communication, but let's move on to...
And again, like, he's just not that into you. He's just not that into you. I think it was such a good analogy to think about if a partner communicated this way, you know, through, again, scriptures and letters that he had not even wrote during the course of your supposed relationship. Let me see if our one black friend popped back up. There he goes. There we go. So it is very interesting. And the other thing I thought in terms of communication is whose communication does he take seriously? Because apparently some people pray for blessings and health and all of this type of stuff, and they get it, and other people don't. And imagine having a partner or just a parent. Because God's supposed to be father. Imagine having a parent who every single time one of your siblings asked for money or to stay out or whatever, they got it, and you were behaving just as good as this person, if not better, and they never gave you anything you asked for, even though they had the resources to do this for everybody. Yeah, like, it's a tough thing to rationalize.
Yeah, that's how I grew up. Right there. That's how I grew up.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is an odd thing. Now this idea of the personal relationship, I think within church culture, it is a way of giving someone a benefit so that they see they're getting something for their, something for their time and their money. Finally, here's the result. I have this personal relationship. Well, statistically, depending on what you pray for, your prayers probably aren't going to get answered for the most part. If you ask to hit the lottery, like the jackpot of the lottery, not can you win $35, it's unlikely to happen to you. If you have a very sick relative, something that's life-threatening, it's very unlikely that without going to a medical facility with trained professionals that your loved one is going to be healed. It's very unlikely. So offering the personal relationship, it's like I paid for the ceramic coating on my paint, so it will protect my paint. It costs thousands of dollars, and hopefully it'll do a great job. Only all they did was spray WD-40 on your paint job, and it looks shinier for now. But it's not a real solution. It's not real protection. It's not the real result that you were expecting, that you paid for. And I think the thing to keep in mind is there's a bias that ensues because many Christians do contribute something financially or something with their time. And they do desperately want the big results to go their way. However, what they're treated to often is small victories that might be relying on someone in the church saying, yeah, I'll help you out, or them or chance, right? Just chance, or that person working their butt off. And it's likely the person working their butt off that produces the best results, not prayer.
So, it's really interesting. So the one thing I was thinking about that's so different, and again, let me just throw another wild curveball out there. But people who date me will learn something about me very quickly. I'm not cheap, I'm broke. And what I think that means is like I don't make a lot of money or a ton of money or have a ton of money, but what I have, I'm willing to spend, especially, when it comes to creating experiences and things for my partner. What I was thinking about with this whole Jesus thing is it's very weird because one of the comparisons I've heard is that like, yo, you're actually like a lot less selfish than a lot of like rich dudes I've dated, right? So women tell me like, oh, I dated guys that had a lot of money, but they were just so damn cheap, right? That because you be thinking sometimes you be asking them like, man, you ever do with a ton of money, like that must have been nice, and they're like, no, not actually, not if he's cheap, right? Like,
that's why they have a lot of money. They don't spend.
Yeah, there you go. That's that's part of what they realize. Yeah, they got there by being hanging on to it. But what's interesting is I'm thinking about that in the terms of Jesus is that super uber powerful partner who not only is supposed to be able to have endless economic resources, but to be able to like heal and bless everybody and give you peace and fix your mental health, everything. But he doesn't. He withholds all of that. Sometimes you have to watch him do it for other people. And then here's the crazy abusive part that made me think about the whole cheap versus broke thing. The actual benefit that you get out of the relationship is just your ability to say you're in that relationship. And that to me is bonkers. Because let's face it, y'all, I don't want to say if the crude way to say it is people use each other. I think the better way to say it is people engage in social relationships with a reasonable expectation of some social exchange that improves their material conditions. A large part of the reason I've gotten to know my one black friend and consider him a friend is because he brings a material benefit to my life of being my co-host every Sunday for couple years now.
2 years, yeah.
Yeah, like you know, and we bring something to each other's life. It's not always bad, you know. It's like you go to work and you get them some labor, they hook you up with a paycheck. There's a material exchange. So even in a romantic relationship, you can say I love my person and I don't care what they make, or they could be poor, unemployed, you know, not physically capable of doing certain things or whatever. You're still going to say I love them because I benefit from their presence, their love, their support, right? It's so crazy to have someone in your life who could give you anything, literally anything.
That's what God is and Jesus are supposed to be capable of.
But then turns around and says the only thing you should really be trying to get out of this is just being with me. Just being with me is supposed to be enough. Forget that I could do all of this for you that at the snap of a finger and I'm not doing it. Like, I don't know, y'all. That shit just had me tripping. All right, let's go.
Wait.
Go ahead. Yeah.
You've reminded me of something. So some years ago, I bought my mother a purse. It was about $49. And it was one of the most beautiful purses I'd ever seen in my life. It had this really soft, almost like glove soft. I don't know if it was leather or what. I doubt it was leather for as cheaply as I bought it. But it was bought at a discount store. I sent it to her, and she told me she wanted a purse, so I got her one. She said she didn't use it because it was too nice. I'm going to contrast that. When I was in Bulgaria, when I was living there and I was going to bring things home, you could buy like knockoffs that were really well made of things like Prada purses. So I would talk to some of my support staff back in the United States. And it's like, hey, I'm coming back. Do you want any of this stuff? Yes. So I'm paying $9 for a brown suede leather Coach purse. It indeed was made of suede leather. It had all the Coach badging, or at least a lot of it. It was very convincing, but it was $9. Okay? Contrast that with my cousin's husband, who is a multi-millionaire. Literally asked me would I go look at a Bentley that was for sale for him. Okay? In California. He doesn't live here. So he bought his wife a $7,000 purse. My cousin asked me, I wanted him to take it back. Like, why do I need this? Why would I use it? And I explained, look, he worked hard for that money, and he's very sweet on you and proud of you, and he thinks you deserve it. So that's his way of sharing his prosperity to you.
Right.
All of these purses do the same thing approximately equally well. The fact that I could go to this one area of Sofia, Bulgaria and pay $9 for knockoff purse is I'm paying for the name. I'm paying for that fancy name because I could have paid less money there for a purse that didn't go through, where someone didn't go through all the trouble of faking it to make it look like something it wasn't. My mom's cheap purse that I bought wasn't cheap, but the inexpensive purse I bought my mom was larger than what my cousin got, larger than what I gave away to my support staff. And she wouldn't use it because she felt it was too nice. My cousin's husband essentially did what? Paid for a name.
Yeah.
Is that what Christians are doing when they say they have a personal relationship with Jesus or personal relationship with God? Are they indeed getting no more than someone like us, right? We're non-believers. We don't believe in any any of that stuff. But we don't have to pay for it. They do. They pay for it with their time. They pay for it with their money. They pay for it with lost opportunity. I think that's it. I think,
and it works too. It's working for me too, because then it's like the more sincere ones are actually paying the higher price, but they're not getting much benefit beyond not being seen as a knockoff.
You know, aren't all these other religions counterfeit?
Yeah.
You got the. I would go there in Bulgaria. I paid like $90 for a copy of a Breitling watch, and it was absolutely beautiful. I gave it to my nephew ultimately, but it was absolutely beautiful, and I was so happy to wear it. And one of our supervisors came from the United States to, look after us on this project. He wanted to make sure we were doing okay, and he's probably got a $250,000 a year job. This is like in 2006 or something like that, and he would buy really expensive watches, and he had to critique my $90 Breitling copy. He goes, first of all, this looks amazing, but here's all the stuff wrong with it. Here's what's cheap about it. He goes, but if you're just looking at it, you wouldn't know that this wasn't the real thing.
Right.
Why?
Right.
Because he's the kind of guy that would buy the real thing. And to me, the watches that I would pay $4 and $5 for from King's Department Store in Fort Wayne, Indiana, back in the 70s, were pretty much had the same functionality as my $90 Breitling copy. Only I knew for a fact those cheap watches from King's Department Store were waterproof, because I was swimming with them in my kiddie pool, and I would look at the time and be so impressed. Oh my gosh, it works underwater. But I wasn't paying for a name. I was paying for functionality. And I do think ultimately I will now be comfortable saying to a believer, I think you're paying for the name. You're not getting anything more out of your faith than I get out of my non-belief. You're not. Because when you die, we have the same fate. We're just going to rot. Our bodies are going to rot unless you have yours cremated.
Man, I love this. I love this. All right, I'm gonna let him roll. I love that though, my one black friend.
Another aspect of having a real personal relationship with someone, quality time, face to face. Many relationships, friendships, family ties end or degrade over time because of what? A lack of actual togetherness. Time spent in each other's presence, side by side, eating together, laughing together, talking together, crying together. Now, you might say you do all those things with your God, but it's just you in a room, isn't it? It takes your faith to believe that he's there, that he cares, that he hears you, or that he responds. And yet, if God is omnipresent, why is there never an actual sit-down moment? Or worse, many Christians will have no problem believing someone's testimony that God actually showed up in the room with them. So he's capable of it. You know this, but has he done it for you? If not, why not? If this God can show up, will show up, has showed up, but won't show up ever one time in real life to you physically, how do you excuse that? Why are you okay with that? Why was it good for the other person? Why did he choose to do that for them? The inconsistency of God's relationship here is bad, and maybe that's the problem in being in a personal relationship with someone who is supposedly in a few billion other personal relationships. Maybe he just doesn't have time for you. But you don't believe that. You believe God is paying every second of attention to you and to everyone else, that he knows every thought and action you have ever done and ever will do, and that he is literally everywhere at the same time. This is the Christian belief. So again, no excuses for why this God won't sit down in a room with you too. But you make some for him, don't you? You have to, or you couldn't maintain your faith. Maybe this is something I'm wanting to show you through this video, is all the work you're doing for this God, which my conclusion here at the end is you're doing 100% of it. He's not real. He doesn't exist. And this whole thing is created by you. It's a terrifying thought and reality. And yeah, you'll claim that you feel his presence, but people feel things all the time. We talked about that before. Does feeling something make it real? I have felt a million things that were not real. Why can't God just be another one of those? If your best friend only ever felt near, never was actually near, never actually showed up, Would you consider that a good relationship? But let's move on to our third part of a good, healthy, real personal relationship, and that is going to be conflict resolution. If you have an issue with a friend or partner or whatever example you're thinking of throughout this whole thing, you can express your frustration and get a response. If a Christian gets angry at God, does God ever apologize? No, he's perfect. He has no need to. What about for not showing up like he did for your neighbor? Well, it was different. You know, my neighbor must have needed that, or God's testing me, or God has a different plan for me, a different path for me. Excuse, gaslighting yourself into an abusive relationship. Worse, if you ever think you have an issue with God, you are told you're the problem. Now we're victim blaming. It must be something you did. You must not be good enough. You must not be sincere enough. You must not be trying hard enough. You must have too much sin. So many barriers for this perfect, all-powerful God who wants a relationship with you. Seems awfully man-made to me. If you had friends who never took responsibility for miscommunication, we'll say that at best, even though it's clear that God will purposely lie to you, deceive you, let you be lied to or deceived, if you like that verbiage better, ignore you or use you as collateral damage. I mean, come on. But again, best case scenario, it's all a misunderstanding. If you had friends that never took responsibility or even claimed awareness of this miscommunication, misunderstanding, and always made it your problem and made you feel guilty, would that be a relationship worth keeping? I don't think so. We'll go a little bit quicker through some of.
All right, that's a good one. I guess I want to let him get through as much of the rest of the stuff as we can. Did you want to say anything about this so far?
Sumami knows a lot about purses.
Sumami knows a lot about purses.
No, he's basically saying what I said. Like they're paying for the name. They're paying for the name. There's literally what, or it must mean something other than what it seems to mean, right? The personal relationship line isn't true if it means personal relationship in the way that we know human beings have personal relationships with each other.
Right.
Think of middle school, think of high school, think of work, right? You may not have a personal relationship with your Uber driver because you just meet that person, you never see them again,
right?
You never communicate with them again, and so on and so on and so on. If it's just one way, if it's people reaching out to you and you not reaching back, there's not a friendship there. There's not a relationship there. If you have the ability to reach back and you don't. So,
go ahead. No, you're good.
Well, I mean, is it? I don't know. I want to say semantics, but we've already been down that road. Like we can be compassionate and even respectful in knowing that people feel that way, that they have a personal relationship. But we also have to be real and think it doesn't mean what you know, from Princess Bride, you keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Right.
It's that simple, and not to be cruel, but somebody can put that on there. Put that in a meme.
So speaking of not meaning what you think it means, I think another big part of this personal relationship thing, and I do think, again, this is definitely also the case increasingly outside of Christianity as well, is it also fits into a time where religion has fallen out of favor, especially serious, being, quote unquote, serious about religion. And a lot of times I think people use this to basically say, to sidestep any critiques of their church, their denomination, their faith, whatever, because you'll hear people say, I'm not religious, or I'm not really religious. I just have a personal relationship, And they don't realize that that is literally one of the most religious things you could say, right? Like I'm not claiming just to believe this faith. I'm claiming that it's part of my everyday life, and I actually have a intimate and ongoing, closeness with this God. So it's weird in that sense too, that it's sort of it's the new way to say you're not religious, even though you're very religious.
of these other ones here. What about reliability? Very important in a good personal relationship. But God is the greatest no-show friend of all time. Real relationships require and involve consistency. If I only came home once or twice a week with no excuses and never told my wife the schedule, never told her where I was when I wasn't with her, most of the time didn't answer her calls, how long do you think we would stay married? How good and useful would that relationship be? And yet, Christians who say God is always there can't prove it. They often complain to other Christians about how they don't feel him there, they feel abandoned, they don't understand where God is or why he won't reply, what his plan is, why they're so in the dark, why they're trying so hard and not hearing anything back. And it's so simple. I mean, if a parent ignored their child's cries for help and CPS shows up at the door after this child has been hungry and unbathed and thirsty, and the parent's excuse was, I was always there in spirit, how well would that work? It wouldn't at all. And yet this is the excuse you give yourself for your God. Even if you think he's providing for you. 4 children have died from hunger since I started this paragraph. Statistically, 2 to 3 of them had parents that would have been crying out to this Abrahamic God. He listened, they suffered, they died. They have no answer, they have no consistency, they have no physical presence, they just have excuses. Ones they better make, or else they're the problem. They don't trust their God. They don't believe in his goodness. They don't believe in his love. Now, not only have they lost a child, but they need to fear for their eternal soul because of what happens, because of the thoughts they're having about this God. Insanity. Truly insanity. And along with this, we could talk about empathy. Christians claim that God comforts them, but how does he comfort them? It's usually through other people, through what they're reading, through friends or family or therapists or doctors. Amazing. If you complain to God about your anxiety, something he says not to have, not an acknowledgement that it will happen, just do not be anxious about anything. If you're someone dealing with depression or fear, again, he says, I did not give you a spirit of fear, but that of a sound mind. Well, what's he going to do about it then? He just said these things aren't real and they're not his problem. And yet when you go to therapy and you work very hard to understand trauma and the root of it and work for years to address it and finally heal in some regards sometimes, you'll thank God for that. No one sees a problem with this? That's just one example. You know what else all relationships need? Boundaries. Boundaries are good. Boundaries are beneficial. They're there to protect the relationship. They involve and require mutual respect. But God doesn't have boundaries. God demands praise and worship, love and obedience. If a human did this, we'd call this emotional abuse. And by the way, again, I've mentioned the special pleading. All I hear for the excuses coming from this is, okay, yeah, but you keep comparing it with people, but this is God. It's so different, but why? And by the way, I agree, it should be different. It should be better. It should be the most perfect, amazing relationship you've ever had. Right. It should be one of pure certainty and reliability and amazing forthright communication. The one being in the world you can completely trust, that you do not need to fear. But that is not what we have. It's the exact opposite, and yet you use it as the same excuse. It makes no sense whatsoever. If a friend said, you have free will, but if you ever leave me, I'll make you suffer forever, that's not a good friend. And why does this God need constant validation if he is so perfect, especially when he is willing to almost never give it? But what about honesty?
All right, hang on. So one thing I want to mention is that one of my real issues with faith these days is the way people use it to substitute for mental health. I think that's one of the things that people don't think enough about. So, you know, the sort of the gaslighting yourself, the God not really being there, the blaming yourself even when you do have anxiety or depression or something like that, where you need actual professional help, but it's treated as a spiritual problem. That's incredibly problematic to me. And it's something I wish people took more seriously. Hang on, my mic's going bothering me. Go ahead. You can talk. Go ahead.
Well, I don't know. I find it difficult to not say what I've already said in this conversation about this. I will say that Crystal has put a link to seculartherapy.org in there. So if you feel that's an option that you would like to exercise, I'd say jump on that and go for it. Walking away from religion, or if you have someone in your household that's very religious and they keep impressing on you that, hey, you need to get right with God and such, they may be able to help you find ways to talk with that person. Although I like to think that we do that here. But if it's not to your satisfaction, by all means, get the help you need elsewhere. This is a really funny topic, in my opinion, because as a believer, I never gave much thought to the fact that it just wasn't the case that I had a personal relationship with God.
Same.
I just never gave it a thought. Like, perhaps it's not true. And maybe
go ahead.
Oh, I think the thumbnail for this episode should be, if you want me to send it to you, I can. That scene from Princess Bride where Inigo Montoya says, "You keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means." But just put at the top, personal relationship with Christ, and no other text. Just the picture of those two guys talking.
Yeah, right now it's the book. He's just not that into you, because that's the title. But yeah, you can send it to me. Okay. So the other thing I was going to mention is, would we ever employ this line of reasoning in any other abusive relationship? This God, we literally say, is in control of the situation that gives people cancer, disease, pain, car accident, whatever it is, or just another terrible human being in your life. Would we ever say about a man who harmed their spouse, oh, he works in mysterious ways, right? He actually, this is part. I mean, people do say terrible like that to victims, but we consider them terrible people who say horrible things to victims and have absolutely no understanding of how to handle these situations, right? Because that we don't employ that sort of excuse making for abuse, especially not for the abusive behavior itself, right? Like you even if you're dumb enough to buy into the, oh, they love you anyway, okay, fine, but you're not going to say that justifies them harming the person. So it's crazy that they don't realize the fact that we would never say that's okay. And then it leads me to have these really weird moments where, I remember even with like the California wildfires, when they happen, you literally see people jumping to, God has done this as a consequence for all of the sin that was happening there, and then turn right around and start praying for the wildfires to cease and not hurt anybody, and I'm like, you're praying. You seem to be praying against your God. When it happened, you said this is God's judgment. Now you're praying for God to stop his judgment. I'm a bit confused.
Yeah, because wouldn't he know? Christopher Hitchens said something, and he probably wasn't the first to say it, that I'm paraphrasing, the only prayer necessary is thy will be done.
Right. Right, absolutely.
Another point. Does God ever tell you anything new? And I know that this seems silly, and you might say, yeah, God is the source of inspiration for all kinds of epiphanies that mankind has had, and on. But really, if you think about it, is it not something that man was capable and has done on their own? Did God ever just give someone the cure for something, or was it a slow process that we can track the evolution of thought and scientific discovery on? You'll thank God for it, the fact that it exists, whatever it is. Maybe it's the understanding of CPR because it saved your husband's life. God never told anyone about that. We had to understand how the human body worked through investigation. When a person goes missing, God never just gives the coordinates. You'll thank him when the police search finally finds them, or when the search and rescue team gets to them. But again, in a real relationship, sometimes it is your friend telling you something new. Did you know this? Hey, I found your wallet. It's right here, and they hand it to you. You thank God all the time for finding your wallet and your car keys, but he didn't, you did. My point with this one is you are giving God credit for a billion things that he quite literally had nothing to do with. But it's how you keep the role play alive. I know you really believe in this being, and I know you really believe you have a relationship with.
I want to address that point about thanking God for like mundane crap. So my aunt called me for tech support last week, and my aunt is super religious, super duper religious. She's in the ministry and all that stuff, and she immediately began to thank God for the fact that I helped her on that. She did eventually thank me, but she gave 99.9% of the credit to God. Well, where I think that comes from, it's a reflex. She is in distress because there's something she cannot do and she needs it done. And in fact, it's pressing because of time. She lives a lifestyle where she believes that this God in heaven is looking out for her interests and needs. And if you saw her house, you'd believe, well, she really thinks that. She's 100% sure it's true. So I think that's where a lot of times this thanking God when someone else is definitely responsible for the positive outcome, I think that's where it comes from. They're just so used to investing in their faith that they're willing to give the credit where it's not due and not thank at all, or not thank as vigorously, as as sweetly the people who are actually involved.
It's the thank the dear leader thing we'd see in different parts of the world, and they're in a cult. I hate to break it to you, and that's why I always bring this up. What is the ask? With Christianity, the ask is not simply to believe in Jesus. The ask is to dedicate your life to Christ. And in a sense, what you're talking about is people who actually do that. Right? So oh my goodness, I found the keys, thank the dear leader. Oh my God, my team won the game, thank the dear leader. Oh my God, I made it home safely from traveling, thank the dear leader. It's intense, and I definitely know people who are that way, and it's interesting to me where the more casual ones sit there and critique those people. And to be honest, I'm always thinking, oh, you don't seem to realize it, but this is what's being asked of you too. You're just not up for it, you know?
Them. But as someone who does not believe that this God exists, a personal God exists, and sees so clearly how all humans fill the gaps in for this, and people in other religions have done the same thing, which you can also admit. I want to free you of this burden of keeping this imaginary friend alive. Imaginary friends can be helpful. Lonely children are the most likely to create imaginary friends, and it gives them a source of comfort. It gives them an idea of being heard when they are otherwise silenced. It gives them some.
All right, I had imaginary friends growing up, y'all. How many of y'all have had imaginary friends growing up?
Jesus.
And somebody actually talked to me and basically tried to tell me my online friends were like imaginary friends. I wanted to punch that person in the face, but I did not.
One who never makes fun of them, even though they are constantly bullied. I do not deny the benefit, but there's a reason that they grow out of it. They mature. They need to deal with reality. I hate to reduce religion in these ways that many atheists will talk about it. It's just Santa Claus for grown-ups. But there's some truth to that idea. So many of us, even as adults, are still so broken, still so empty, still have so many issues, many of which I think can be attributed to believing in something that is untrue their entire life and having to be responsible for that and even threatened with hell because of that. But there's other real traumas that have nothing to do with this God. And when you turn to something that isn't there to solve them, you might band-aid it for a while. But just like that same child who, if they grew to be 75 believing in their imaginary friend the whole time, this is not going to go well for them. Dealing and facing with reality matters. And I had more here where we could talk about the double standards in forgiveness and personal responsibility and what real relationships look like versus parasocial relationships. But I think you get the point I was trying to make with this. Maybe I should touch on the parasocial one really quick. You guys probably know what a parasocial relationship is. Some of you might be in one with me. Probably not. I don't have a big enough audience for that, but it happens. It happens a lot, actually. The studies on it are fascinating. It's these one-sided relationships where, because you have such insight into a supposed life of another, like a celebrity, you see yourself within that life, and you create for yourself an idea of a relationship that's not there. The difference between that, though, and having a parasocial relationship with God is that you have reinforcement. The lonely guy who thinks that he's Paris Hilton's husband, we all laugh at, which we shouldn't. It's a very sad thing that has happened to him, but we judge it for what it is. It's not real, and we want them to know it's not real so that they can get help, so that they can be free of this. But in religion, the rest of the people who believe like you say, yeah, no, you're right, you are hearing from him. Yeah, no, you're right, he totally showed up. Yeah, that miracle over there, it totally happened, and we attribute it to this particular God. That's
all right, I want to go back a sec because I want y'all to hear something he said that was pretty profound.
No, it's not real, so that they can get help, so that which we shouldn't. It's a very sad
Here we
thing
go.
that has happened to him, but we judge it for what it is. It's not real, and we want them to know it's not real so that they can get help.
It's not real, and we want them to know it's not real so that they can get help. Religion, to me, is the only thing that it's so right there in front of our faces, but we have not yet gotten to this place. It's not real, and we know it's not real. We want them to know it's not real so they can get help. I think that's where we need to be in this moment. I just don't even, it's very difficult for me to see how a reasonable adult person can believe in this. I think people are largely believe in these things because they were indoctrinated as children. It's, you know, it's to me, a lot of this stuff is unfathomable, but yeah, I just I don't I literally find myself going, I don't even know how people could think this anymore. But largely I do think it's because we're not doing enough to just kill it, to just say, okay, you know what, this stuff we can't definitively prove a negative, but this isn't legitimate. We do it with Santa Claus, we do it with the Easter Bunny. We do it with the imaginary friends if you keep it up for too long. We just never go there with God, and it really does suck because it keeps a lot of really bad people in positions of power, and it necessitates abuse, in my opinion, because you've got to be willing to be a part of this deceptive practice and really do a number on people to keep them in the flock. And so it's very difficult to not see believers as victims. But I think people, myself included, are so, quite frankly, just intimidated by the level of power given to faith and religious authorities in our society, that it just still feels like a very risky and dangerous proposition to publicly oppose belief.
Yeah, I think there's a balance. When the conversation is being had between a non-believer and a believer, you can't give up respect. I think it's wrong to be disrespectful. I think it's also wrong not to say what you really think with non-offensive language. You know, wow, only you have this childlike stupidity about you. and that's why you believe it. No, don't say that. Just like, look, you clearly have a sincerity about you, but it's about something that you don't understand. You don't fully understand it. You haven't read the Bible. You don't go to church. You don't follow the following principles that Jesus had. You're not a Christian. What you might be is a wonderful, nice, well-meaning person, but a Christian you are not. And if that's the case, you don't have a personal relationship with Christ. You don't have the Holy Spirit looking out after you, and you don't have God looking out after you. If so, look, if you think that's the case, probably the conversation ender is demonstrate that to me right now. And when they say it can't, then maybe it isn't true. When they say I can't, then you can simply reply, maybe it isn't true.
Yeah, no, that's I think that's so spot on. I'm gonna let us wrap this up. That was great.
Okay.
So that they can be free of this. But in religion, the rest of the people who believe like you say, yeah, no, you're right. You are hearing from him. Yeah, no, you're right. He totally showed up. Yeah, that miracle over there, it totally happened. And we attribute it to this particular God. That's why it feels so different. That's why it feels so real. That's why it's so socially acceptable for something that otherwise would be not. And Christians defend their God like fans in parasocial relationships defend the celebrity. They excuse everything away. They never expect personal responses. They make excuses when things don't line up or happen in the way that they should if that relationship were real. And it becomes so unbelievably apparent when you have that outsider perspective, which you can't get when you're still in Christianity. I know, I get it. It's so hard, but just pick any example you want. A boyfriend or girlfriend is an easy one. Not that we should be thinking of ourselves as boyfriend or girlfriend of this God, although they would have you believe you're the bride Christ. So maybe not that far off. What if your significant other never spoke to you directly, only through old cryptic letters, the Bible? What if they demanded you love them or face punishment? What if they never helped when you needed them most? Other people did, and you attributed it to them because you were so afraid of not believing in them, per the last thing. They let bad things happen to you, if not cause bad things to happen to you, because it was their plan for you. And they had billions of people who also claimed to be in relationship with them, with mutually exclusive and contradicting ideas about who they are and how they act and how they operate. We could take this example forever. What if they never replied to one of your texts? And when you complained to your friends about it, they said, no, well, that's your fault. You must have sent the text wrong. What if they told you they were perfect and literally every single thing that you perceived to be wrong was your fault? What if they were extremely hot and cold, sometimes giving you nice presents, blessing you, sometimes abusing you completely and to the fullest extent, even being able to take your life where you will still say thank you? What if they bragged about their jealousy over you, and even though they never spent personal real time with you, if you ever even considered leaving them for another, again, the threats they would give to you? What if they had no boundaries? They set all the rules, they set all the limits, it was always one-sided, and you had no input in it whatsoever? What if they hurt you, and when you cried, they just said, you don't understand my plan? You weren't allowed to leave them, but every once in a while they'd come around and they'd tell you, you're so special to me. The same thing they're saying to billions of other people. You understand how sick this all is if it weren't God. Somehow when it's God, it becomes beautiful and perfect. Special pleading, insane excuses, cognitive dissonance. That's how you get away with this. That's how this God, this religion, gets away with this. You'll say God works in mysterious ways. You'll say his ways are higher. You'll say he's God, he can do what he wants. As if these things explain away any of those issues I just gave. They're just how you let yourself off the hook for not dealing with reality. You can't criticize my beliefs. They're based on my relationship with God, and yet that relationship is incredibly vague, only available to you because of the source material or the tradition in history, completely subjective to where and when you are born, and indistinguishable from emotions and coincidence. A real personal relationship requires clear communication, mutual care, and tangible interaction, none of which you can have with this God. The idea of this is borrowed from scripture, shaped and reinforced by culture and religion, and contradicted by the existence of other religions. You can believe in your personal experience, you can claim personal relationship, but you cannot do so honestly, as evidence at least, for the proof of your particular God, when the same claims and same form of evidence is used by everyone else who has ever believed in any other God ever. It just fails so hard. But I'm done, I promise. Thank you for being here. I hope sincerely that this was helpful, because I know this is
That was good. That was I definitely think it was, helpful, especially if you hadn't thought about the issues with having a personal relationship. And I do think it's really important that he tied it to everybody's got this going on. Everybody's God is blessing them, answering prayers, and also the cruelty of you just got diagnosed with terminal cancer. You're supposed to thank God. You just got laid off. You're supposed to thank God. Your child just died tragically. You're supposed to thank God.
Rejoice always.
Wow.
One of the shortest verses in the Bible. Rejoice always.
Yeah, it's pretty out there, and I do also think that it's important because to me it's almost like with Christianity and more other religions, I think it's sort of the hallmark of modern faith practice. There is a way in which the idea of proclaiming yourself a good religious person is kind of passe. People still do it, and people definitely describe other people that way. But I think largely people like to see themselves as on some spectrum from not religious to mildly religious, and focusing on what they consider to be their personal relationship with Jesus is their way of sidestepping association with what they may feel are problematic or constraining aspects of the religious practice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so those are my closing thoughts on it. Where are you at, my one black friend?
I'm going right back to they're paying for a name. They're paying for a name. What they have is no better, no greater than what everyone else has. They're just paying for the name. The self-satisfaction, not self-satisfaction long term, the self-assurance that everything is going to be all right, they're just paying for a name. God will work things out in time. Well, the rest of us who don't believe in God use the very same instrument of time in order to see if things work out. So I guess that's it for me.
Yeah. And the analogy with the bags is a really good one, because there's a lot of people who pay a lot more for the authentic experience, but don't get much more functionality out of doing so.
That's right.
Yeah.
Near zero or zero.
All right, gang. Thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in. We really appreciate it. If you're watching later, please leave a comment down in the comment section and keep the discussion going. You can also join our Discord, and there should be a link in the description for Gather, which is our virtual headquarters. You can come hang out when we're not live. Also want to thank the mods and everybody that's been here for the live chat. Please do subscribe to the channel and give us a thumbs up on the way out. All of those things really do help. Also,
Yes.
tomorrow I'll be on Black Free Thinkers over on Skeptic Haven, so make sure you are subscribed there. And also, I'm supposed to link up with Michael Beverly soon, so hopefully we'll get that set up. Hey, Ember, it's just great to see everybody here. Appreciate y'all. We love you guys.
Definitely.
And as always, take care of yourselves
And each other.
All right.